you see my socks?
No, sir. Maybe in a wide shot, but it's all right.
I've been known to have holes in the bottom of my socks.
And good evening. Welcome into the Larry Krystkowiak Coaches Show presented by Smith's here tonight. A little fireside in the office with the snow falling outside. We're going to talk Utah basketball for the next hour leading up to the national championship game, which starts at 6 on our flagship radio home, ESPN 700. Now, if you want to reach the show tonight, a couple of ways to do it. You can hit us on the text line at 877-353-0700 or just tweet at me at ESPN 700. Bill, we'll talk a little bit about the road trip that was down to Arizona. We'll give out our weekly awards. The Washington schools come in this week, so we'll talk about all that. And, of course, at the end of the show, our three-question, two-man weave coming up here with the coach. How are you?
Doing good.
Had a good weekend, didn't you?
Yeah, it was good. It was, dang close, a game of inches in that second ball game. But our guys really fought, and I feel like we're connected and have to get much, much better on defense. But our offense has made some big strides, and it's nice when you see those shots going in. And I think we're playing the game the right way with the exception of some turnovers. But it was good to get out on the road and open up conference play in that kind of fashion.
I kind of feel like maybe of the last 6 halves of basketball you've played, 5 have been pretty good. Maybe just that second half against Nevada. But the other 5 halves of basketball you guys have played have really been good basketball. It looks like, I don't know what it is, and you and I have talked about it before, sometimes around Christmas time, things click a little bit with guys that haven't necessarily all been on the same page. Christmas time came and went. It looks like you guys are now kind of a bit more of a cohesive unit, everybody on the same page.
Well, I feel that way. I feel that some role development has taken place, some better understanding from our young kids, the only way you really speed that process up is time. And so some of those guys are working hard, the freshmen are, and Booth sprained his ankle last week on Monday, didn't practice all week. So it was a little bit of a non-factor for us on the weekend, and Riley got a good introduction for what Pac-12 play is all about. And I told both of those kids that it's really hard to be a freshman, but just to keep hanging and hanging in there and banging around and doing their thing. And we had a really productive film session from our Arizona game, and we got a different animal coming in here, Washington, and some of the the complications that they pose a lot on the other end of the spectrum than what we saw at Arizona with the Arizona schools.
Arizona State, we'll start with that Thursday night, wasn't the best start out of the gate. You even said that after the game. You got down 17 points, but for the first, well, not the first time, but the first time in the first half, you guys had to dig out of that deficit. Some of those deficits have come in the second half of games, but your guys didn't hang their heads, and you got down 17. You call a timeout. What's your message, and how did you see your guys respond down 17?
Well, I think in coach, there were 2 things that we talked about. Well, first, I'd watched just about every game that Arizona State had played, and they were at Vanderbilt. And that was one of the games I watched. They lost by 18 at Vanderbilt, and as I'm watching that game, I'm like, wow, Arizona State started off on an 11-0 run. And so that creeped into my head is like, there'll be an opportunity to get back in the game. And then the flip side is, why is it that we're down? It was exactly, we kind of got hit by a freight train. It was turning the ball over. And they got 8 points out of our turnovers in transition, and we couldn't get a defensive rebound. It was kind of a comedy of errors. So when we did get them to miss, they'd end up scoring. And I remember the very first defensive rebound we got, it was about 5 minutes into the game. I'm sure you remember it, where Jace and Donnie were kind of fighting over it, and Donnie let go of it, and Jace traveled.
Yeah.
And then after that, we got a little feel for what it was like to get some of their misses. And we hung in there and we hit some shots. There's no doubt about it. And, momentum's a funny thing. And dug ourselves out of that hole. I remember saying in the timeout, there's no 17-point play.
Right.
And there's plenty of time left. And we just kind of chipped away. And then we came out of the locker room focused again. And we played zone the first half. And then we went complete man in the second half and got into some guys a little bit. And we were good on both ends of the ball. That's the side of it. Shots were going in. Sed had a big night. Parker 4 threes, Donnie 6 threes, Cedric 5 threes, if I remember right, somewhere in there. So, and those threes add up fast. Got some confidence, and it was fun. It was a a really fun feeling for our guys to have been grinding as long as we have and to get things kicked off the way we did.
Well, Ced's been on a little bit of a roll. He had that 33-point game against Nevada. Followed that up with the 26. Then he had the 24 and then the 26. But I thought the guy that was as key as anybody for you guys, because sometimes second half starts haven't been your thing this year, and that's where you've dug that hole against some of the better teams. But Parker, I think all 13 of his points in the ASU game came in the second half, and he came right out of the locker room shooting, hit a couple early threes for you.
Yeah, we put in a couple specials, offensive specials for Parker. I think that's the thing, making sure that guys have a couple plays that they can hang their hat on. Like, this is my time to do my thing. And Parker's as good on our team as we have at catch and shoot, and sometimes you forget about some of that stuff. You don't want to introduce a bunch of these plays in the preseason. You become scoutable, and you have to tinker and make some changes, have some counters to some things because it's such a well-scouted league. But we broke a couple of those specials out for him. He hit some shots, and then credit to our guys too. It was a high assist. I believe we had 18 assists. It was a high assist. I remember Parker missing a shot, Donnie getting the rebound. And I think a month ago probably would have found a way to force it up to the rim, and he just pivoted, passed it to Parker, gave him a second chance, and he knocked it down right in front of our bench. So it's not just guys stepping up and making plays. It's magical. I think guys are trusting each other and figuring it out that we have to do this collectively, and then everybody individually has a little bit better night.
Yeah, and you were talking about some of your freshmen, Riley and Booth, and Booth had the ankle, and Riley was playing some tough guys, some big physical guys.
Yeah.
But your one freshman that really stepped up and had two good games down in the desert was Timmy Allen.
Yeah, and I think you hit the magic word there with physicality. That's when you look at Booth and Riley, I think that's the thing, and we've done a lot of before and after pictures with Rock, our strength coach. And the reality is that Riley and Booth need to put on some pounds.
Sure.
Need to gain some confidence. And I think Timmy's we've said it all along when we recruited him, and his mindset to play defense. He was player of the game defensively for us in both games. Brings that effort. There's still some things he needs to improve on, but that's usually why freshmen are a little bit behind, is on the defensive end of the ball. And Timmy shines in that area, and obviously nobody's pushing him around. He's 225 pounds, and it looks like he's a senior out there. So I think when you get into conference play, a little bit more of it becomes the grind. And if we have some deficiencies in some of those areas, guys are going to have to lend a hand. It's going to maybe take two people to block a guy out when Riley's dealing with one of those guys.
Sure.
And I think we'll start figuring that out.
It's the Coach's Show presented by Smith's tonight as we talk a little bit about Utah basketball. So they get the win on Thursday night against ASU, who, at least heading into the weekend, most people perceived as the best team in the conference, or at least they were in the non-conference. So how much does Thursday night, you had that quick turnaround. It was that Thursday, Saturday, and it was the early Saturday game, so it was about a 36-hour turnaround. How much could you sense, because you're down in Tucson for a day on Friday, we always talk about confidence builds when you see the ball go in the basket. Confidence also builds when you get a nice road win, too. Did you feel like the team was in a pretty good place Saturday?
Well, I know that winning is good medicine. You get out on those road trips, and we've had plenty of them where I can remember road trips to the Bay Area where the one that comes to mind is the Stanford game where we missed 6 free throws at the end and we end up losing that game. And then you sit in San Francisco for 3 days.
Right.
That's not healthy. It kind of gets into dog years where one day is a week. And then, so obviously there's some feel good on the bus ride down to Tucson. And, guys played together really well. The one thing about this trip that wasn't, and I mentioned it to our guys on the whiteboard against Arizona, sometimes you play two teams that are completely different, and you kind of have to flip a switch. And if you don't have adequate time between games to prep for that, it's kind of, two ends of the spectrum, and you can't work on all that in practice.
Sure.
This weekend, or that week in practice, was very much a transition, rebounding, in-to-out mentality, guarding some athletes. So when we rolled into Tucson, short of a few tweaks here and there, the game plan was kind of the same, and it felt a little bit more comfortable that we weren't playing, a completely different monster, but there were a lot of the same things to write up on that whiteboard.
You lose the game in overtime, another hard-fought game down in Tucson, as they always seem to be. But there had to have been some things you liked coming out of that game. I mean, your team fought really hard. You were in it, had chances to win it, or at least go a little further. What did you like most coming out of that game when you went back and looked at it?
Well, I think offensively we've made big strides. And, there's only so much time in a week. But I thought maybe the previous month we were a little bit inept and we had some confusion with the offense. And it's human nature in basketball, certainly, that when the offense is struggling, you're just not going to be, we don't have that tough-minded veteran group that's going to be able to get stops.
Right.
So the offense, and that's been the priority, probably 3/4 of our time the last couple weeks has been to work on some things, get crisper execution, the concept of sharing the ball, and that all came to fruition on that weekend. And now the focus shifts a little bit. We had a lot of defensive breakdowns, particularly against Arizona State, and things that were right before our eyes. We tackled them today in practice, and the guys are ready to go. And it really starts with keeping the ball in front of you. And they do have elite athletes. Maybe you can't be as close. And it takes the other two guys besides the guy. We've been using Jerry Sloan's analogy a lot with, guard your flipping guy.
Yeah.
And if you can't, that person needs to make the assumption, I have no help. I got to keep this guy in front of me. Having said that, the other four guys have to understand that the ball scores and they need to show some numbers, and we need to have more of an in to out mentality. And I thought we got extended, and we presented a lot of driving lanes and top down penetration time and time in the Arizona game really hurt us.
End of game, regulation, call a timeout. Did you get the look you wanted going to Timmy Allen down on the low block? Was that the look you were hoping for?
Yeah, we called his number on a set play.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And it was, one of those, the guy fronted him. They knew where we were going. And I think Donnie made a nice pass over the top. And Timmy just took his eyes off the ball, and wanted to score it before he caught it. And the ball went out of bounds. And that was one of too many turnovers, 18 turnovers that we had in the game. But I was really proud of the execution. And then we had a plan after that to, had that not worked, to go from there. But we definitely were on it, and the guys have done a good job executing.
You get to overtime, you don't have your leading scorer, the one guy on your team that can break a defense down, get a bucket, things like that. You had to play the last minute and a half of regulation and all of overtime without Cedric. Your guys hung in there. You made some big shots. You had that last look. Did you draw that up for Parker? That top of the look, was that the primary?
And we knew exactly what was going to happen. We were down one, and obviously we could have tried to score a bucket inside. We've been there before. It's really hard to blow your whistle with any kind of contact. And we switched up our big on this particular set that we ran, and we knew they were going to switch the pick and roll with the four-man, and Acott switched out on Parker, and he's really good at getting the shot off that he did. I thought the shot was in. I talked to Parker about it. We've got a lot of faith in putting him in that position, and we wouldn't do anything different next time.
It was there. It was in and then popped out on.
Yeah, believe me, I watched it in slow motion.
I'm sure you have. And Parker, Parker on the post-game show, if he thought it was in, he said, when it left my hand, I thought it was in.
Yeah. No, I think we all did. And I really had a feeling. I told our guys with about 10 minutes left in the game, because we were in a position, Booth, Parker hit a big three in overtime. But I just had a sneaking suspicion that we needed to go with a veteran guy that had been there before and really set up well. We're proud of his effort. The whole thing for our offense right now is taking care of the ball. We've got all the data in the world that when the Utes have the basketball in their hand, each possession we score about 1.505 points per possession. And whether you want to take the first two turnovers, their first two buckets, Parker threw it to them on a pick six, laid it in, and then got stripped and they laid it in. Those are the ones that kill you. It's not just the one you didn't get, because statistically you get one. It's the two you give up going the other way. And then it kind of came full circle back to that overtime where we had 3 turnovers going down the stretch too. And you can look at that in a overtime game. Obviously, we just needed one of those, and so our guys, a lot of defense is going to get focused on, and then let's not turn the ball over. And here we've got Washington coming in, which leads our conference in steals and block shots and some of those things. So the timing is really key that we absorb that quickly.
We'll talk about Washington coming up here on the Coaches Show. Tonight's show brought to you by our friends at Deseret First. Drive home a smart deal and get 1% cash back on an auto loan from Deseret First Credit Union. Membership and eligibility required. Limited time offer. Terms and conditions do apply. We'll come back. Washington in a few minutes. Team awards too. But in the next segment, we've got some questions from fans, from Utah basketball fans that will fire Coach's way. It's a Monday night. It's the Coaches Show presented by Smith's right here from Learfield. Game. He's knocked some down. We welcome you back into the Coaches Show tonight, and as always, brought to you by Anheuser-Busch, proud sponsor and official sponsor of Utah Athletics and Utah basketball. Always reminding you to enjoy responsibly. Maybe you'll be enjoying responsibly tonight watching the national championship game. I'll be asking you your prediction on that in a little while.
Okay.
We'll talk about Donnie Tillman here in a second, but we have some questions from the audience tonight. This one comes in from the 311 Ute. He said, have you considered playing a small ball lineup and using Riley Batton at the 5?
Yeah, there have been some times that we've thought about that. The rebounding is the big key. for us, and we've done a really good job as of late. Arizona was the first game in a long stretch of games. You know, even going Kentucky, we out-rebounded them by 8, Bill, and you just don't do that against that team. And Arizona State, we out-rebounded. Nevada, we out-rebounded. And it's hard. You know, that's what you have to give up. You know, and a lot of the games we've played recently kill people on the glass.
Right.
So it's different if you're maybe playing somebody that doesn't have a bunch of guys that are going and getting the misses, but when they do, I think it's imperative that you have a bigger body, and that's been some of the thinking at this point. You know, offensively, if you're looking for ways to score points, maybe you go small, assuming you're adequate on defense. But right now, our focus has been making sure that we're securing
Rebounding and defense.
Big keys for us. Yep.
Offense hadn't been a problem. Speaking of defense, 311 had a follow-up. He says, what do you see as the biggest reason for your low defensive efficiency numbers this year so far?
Well, I mean, I think we're talking about some of it is one of the elements. We can work on guarding the bounce all day long in our practices.
Right.
All of a sudden, you throw some different characters out there that are a little faster, a little more explosive, and that, at the end of the day, it starts with that, and that's where we're focused now. Some of it is some breakdowns with our feet, you know, the simplicity of the proper closeout. And I'll go back to what we talked about in the program to start with. If we do have some deficient areas in guarding penetration, then we need to make the guy pass. And so whoever are my two guys flanking over here, they can't be out finger touching their guy to expose this lane.
Right.
And that's, at the end of the day, that's where a lot of this has started. Yeah, and I went through notes today and I shared them with our team, maybe 12 NBA teams. We got the accumulation of all their defensive philosophies and the most important things to win games at the defensive end. And there wasn't one team that didn't have in the first or second thing, you have to limit penetration. And so that's been our breakdown right now, I think. And then I'm not going to go to the well with it all the time, but we had some young kids, and that's always the problem when you take that next step up, is making sure you understand the concept of defending, and that's been it.
You've also played teams too that haven't necessarily been great outside shooting teams. They've been, you know, Nevada, Kentucky, at least on paper. Arizona State and Arizona, none of those teams were great three-point shooting teams coming in. They were all drive and slash teams, weren't they?
Well, that's what we thought with Kentucky.
Right.
You know, and you can play
a bunch of them.
Yeah, you can play the numbers. You know, and we've got one kid, I forget his name, hit 6 threes against us, and there's no question that, you know, he hung his hat on penetrating and getting to the rim. So you spend a lot of time working on that, and you're gapping him, and he jumps up and makes shots. I'd also like to think that we've played as hard a schedule as anybody in our conference, and some of these numbers, because you're playing teams, Minnesota's having a heck of a year, Kentucky, Nevada, BYU, there's a lot of offense there between those teams.
Right.
And so when you take your data in play, that's going to be an area that you might not be where you want to be. The key for us is that we got to start getting better. You know, we got to start. Really, it's got to be an emphasis. We've got to start hanging our hat on it, and then you can't take steps back from the progress we've made with rebounding and with scoring the ball. And that's what a season's all about. You know, you kind of see where our problem areas right here, and our guys heard it loud and clear today that it's defense, stopping the ball, keeping it in front of you.
Last question from you, Buntu, says, has the team suddenly figured things out against the Arizona schools, or maybe some of the non-conference schools that you played and lost to, a whole lot better than the schools that you saw this weekend? Which do you think it might be if you were picking between the two, or is it a little bit of both?
I know our conference is getting beat up around the country but you can't tell me that Arizona State and Arizona are both teams, specifically when you're playing them on the road, that are high-powered teams. They're no lesser team than Minnesota. I think a lot of it's some inexperience. A lot of it's trying to get everybody on the same page. You No, I just, we had a little give up in us, I thought, where things got hard in a few games. And, we've got to, the consistency is the big thing. That's where you keep those runs from happening is, when a team goes on a 4-0 run or a 6-0 run, it has to end there. And I think we've shot ourselves in the foot a number of times. And in those games that we lost early on, we kind of got out of the fight a little bit. And I hope our team has grown in that regard. I think they showed that in Arizona State, that, it reared its head as like, hey, let's get back in this.
Right.
And I think that's the experience. That's the confidence that you have to find. It's not like I'm feeling great about myself. As we've always talked about, a bunch of sayings, Navy SEALs, you're never out of the fight, and it's really hard to beat somebody that never gives up. Some of those things we can talk about, but until we actually experience it on the court and find some success, then guys are like, oh yeah, coach, he's not just blowing smoke, but that's actually legitimate. And so I hope that that's something that will grow with the rest of the season and avoid some of those, those big momentum swings.
We'll come back and do our weekly awards here on the Coaches Show tonight, presented by Smith's. We'll give you our Team Player of the Week and our Sub of the Week, presented by Subway. That as we continue on a Monday night. The Coaches Show presented by Smith's from Learfield.
Where's 311?
That's our drive of the game presented by Nissan. On the court, it's the job of the defense to protect the rim. On the road, it's the job of the 2019 Nissan Rogue to help protect you. Available advanced safety technologies. Nissan's a proud supporter of college and Utah athletics. That was that pretty scoop shot Cedric had at the end of the shot clock against Arizona State, where he got in the lane. There was about 1 second left on the shot clock, and he scooped it up with the left hand.
Yeah, that was pretty. That was a big one for sure. I loved it.
Would he be your selection as your player of the week this week?
Yeah, certainly. Gave us a heck of a lot of firepower and was good defensively against Arizona State, not so much in the Arizona game. 3 of his fouls were getting beat and then reaching at the end. But he's been a catalyst for us, giving us some punch, and he's making guys around him better because they're spending enough attention on him. And finding some guys, and we had some good performances. The first game, Donnie and Timmy were both really solid on both sides of the ball, and Donnie was hitting the threes. Donnie hit some big threes against Arizona. So we had a bunch of guys that were did their thing, and I think Ced for sure would be our guy.
Yeah, he had 24 and 26 points respectively in the 2 games against the Arizona school. So he'll be our Team Utah Player of the Week, brought to you by University of Utah Health. With 16 convenient neighborhood health centers, they've got a game plan for your family's health. Visit them online at University of Utah or uofuhealth.org. That brings us to our sub of the week, and I think that's an easy one because you've been bringing him off the bench. It's got to be Donnie Tillman, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Timmy Allen's been starting. Timmy had a good week, but Donnie's been coming off the bench. He had a career high 22 against ASU, and then he had 21 to back that up against Arizona.
Yeah, and Donnie's doing a nice job, again on the defensive end. He stepped in there against Arizona, and I thought took a big charge that got called a block, but he's really getting dialed in. I think coming off the bench gives him a little bit of an opportunity to watch the game, and he gives us some versatility because he can play 3 or 4. Should we encounter some foul trouble, he can come in and give guys multiple spots a break, and it's worked out really well. He was big. He was a catalyst.
But both he and Cedric look like different guys post-Christmas. They came back from Christmas break, and Ced was terrific against Nevada. Donnie's been terrific in 2 of the last 3. It almost looks like, I don't know, mom and dad, aunts and uncles, somebody had to talk with them at Christmas time. Maybe it was you guys when they got back from Christmas, but those guys look very engaged and very focused the last few games.
I agree with you, and I think it happens in a lot of different ways, but sometimes you get back after a preseason, you spend some family time, you put some things in perspective. And I know in both of those kids' case, when they went home, they didn't get a lot of wrong information from their families because they understand the game. Donnie's mom's involved. Donnie has other people that are involved that are all on the same page with us.
Right.
And Cedric's hearing the same thing. And so I think there's that moment where they go home and they might be on the fence as whether, am I getting screwed in this deal? Is the coach blowing smoke up my rear end? Can you tell me something to make me feel? And when the message is the same coming from everybody, I think they probably had a little heart-to-heart with themselves. And, we took them out of the starting lineup. That's always a wake-up call for kids. And they've come back and really responded well from it.
So Donnie will be our Subway Sub of the Week. Subway's got a wrap for you. You can get right now a signature wrap and a 21-ounce drink for only $1 more, only at Subway today, and save. One other guy I wanted to ask you about, because we've talked about him a few times on this show and on pregame conversations, is Chuck Jones. And you've told me on a number of occasions, sometimes junior college guys take a little bit longer. Sometimes Christmas time is when that light switch comes on. And Charles Jones had a nice night against Arizona State. He had 8 points and 5 rebounds at about 6 feet tall. And then he was the guy when Cedric fouled out. You played him down the stretch in regulation and into overtime. I think he logged his most minutes. I think he had about 23 minutes against Arizona in the second half. So what have you seen from Charles? And it looks like he's now building a little bit of confidence.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's a scrapper. He's going to play his rear end off. I think in Charles's case, you always talk about the things that are in our building on those photos, the big photos. Play hard, play smart, and play together. There's no doubt in my mind that Charles is always going to play really hard. and I think he's going to want to be a part of a team and play together. Some of it has been some of the nuances, I think, with terminology and guarding, and what you have to be able to figure out is he's not in man-on-man coverage all the time, you know, as a cornerback, where he can just try to take his guy out, because that's been problematic with helping our team. When you get in, you talk about some of those rotations, you got to have everybody connected with each other. And so some of the, and I'm not saying that Charles is not smart, but it's the intelligence part and it's our scheme part, and, you know, figuring out a way to find, and I think he's becoming more and more comfortable with that side of things. And he really cares. I mean, there's some guys that care, and you know, didn't get a lot of opportunity in the first half at Arizona, and I could tell he kind of fell off the horse a little bit and got emotional at halftime. And, you know, I've got multiple assistant coaches that are coming up saying, hey, Chuck needs a chance in the second half, and I agree. And so he battled, and hopefully that helps him, you know, propel. We're going to need him without a doubt, and I think the best is yet to come for him offensively. We're trying to simplify A, B, C, here's what you do, and sometimes he gets himself in trouble when he dribbles. He needs to think about shooting or do things quicker. But yeah, he was a big lift for us, and he's really engaging, and he's, you know, all our guys love him, and he's involved even when he's on the bench. He helps in the timeouts and makes sure that everybody stays connected.
He seems to have a real positive vibe about him right now, both in the game and on the bench too. Yeah,
and even today coming in, you know, the locker room and stuff, you can just tell, you know, we need everybody that's involved to be all in, you know, and it's not always going to be perfect, and there's going to be ups and downs, and we understand that. But as long as we have your commitment that you're all in and willing, and I think we've gotten to that point with some of that trust with Charles being a new guy. So hopefully we're on an upward climb here.
I've gotten this from a lot of Utah fans, and maybe you can just update us. How's Lahat's rehab coming, and how's he kind of easing himself back into basketball? We can all see the cast and the crutches are gone, but how's he doing with practice?
Well, it hasn't been cleared to practice yet, but he's doing a heck of a lot of conditioning. Yeah, biking and some running on our fancy treadmills over there, the water treadmill and the Altergy that takes some of the load off. You know, anytime you're dealing with that fifth navicular, or the fifth bone on the outside of his foot, it wasn't the navicular bone, but put a screw in there, and the x-rays all came back really clean, and now we'll just, you know, get him back. It's undoubtedly, unless something crazy happens, you know, it'll be a red shirt year for him. And you talk about a guy that just lights up the room, and he would be a guy, just trust me going forward, that when people get in and around the rim, we won't have to deal with, you know, so many iffy, are we going to be able to not foul, because he can keep some separation, change a lot of shots, and block a lot of shots.
Something you'd like to have right now.
We would. We would, yep.
So it's good to have Lahat at least trending in the right direction here. Yeah. But as you know, big guys, feet issues, you got to be really careful with that stuff.
Yeah, and you know, when they x-rayed his foot, they saw the obvious break on the fifth metatarsal, but he also had at the same time, he had a fracture in his second metatarsal of the same foot that he was playing through.
Was that pre-existing?
Well, it was something, you know, who knows?
That he had been playing with.
Yeah, and, you know, some of it gets back into where he grew up in Senegal. You're not always getting the best nutrition for your bones, and so, you know, our diet staff and everybody's really boosted up some things and try to make sure that he's, you know, getting back on his feet here before we throw him to the Wolves and put him at a high risk again. Utes
are back home this week. They've got the Washington schools coming in on Thursday and Saturday. Huskies and the Cougars. We'll talk a little bit about the Huskies Thursday night. That's an 8 o'clock game. We'll have it for you right along the network lines. We'll come back on the other side, look at Mike Hopkins' team and what they bring in on Thursday on our Coaches Show presented by Smith's right here from Learfield. Tillman to Topalovic for the dunk. That's our play of the week, brought to you by Code Red Mountain Dew and Pepsi, proud sponsors of Utah basketball. That's how you do the do. We're back here on the Coaches Show tonight with games coming up on Thursday and Saturday. It's got to be nice for you knowing you're not on the road with the team for the next 2 weeks. You got 3 straight at home, and next week's like a full week because you don't play till Sunday against Colorado. Your only Sunday home game this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my wife said in bed last night. She said, you only have, 4 more trips, and then that's the beauty, I think, of travel partners. It gives you an opportunity. A lot of the other leagues, you're, home, gone. At least we get to kind of unpack the shaving kit.
Yeah.
At worst, you're unpacking it for a while as opposed to finding a little vibe. So we got to get something cooking here at home, and our fans have always been great. Certainly after Christmas, after the New Year, when we can all kind of shift gears into basketball mode, and we need to get the Huntsman rocking and, create that home court advantage, get some students in there, and hopefully we can do that because that's a big part. I've talked to a lot of people, and we have to understand that from a outside perspective, kids come in here and know that they're going to have their hands full, and the crowd really plays it's a big difference for us, putting the students behind their bench, and it can have an impact on a lot of the results of these games.
When the place is full, and I think you'll probably agree with me, this building, the McHale Center where you played on Saturday, where they always know your name and they're right up your backside there, the fans, not the students. But I think also Heck Ed up at Washington when they're good, because those students are right behind you. And that's an old building that's a little smaller. But those are the 3 buildings to me that always stand out when they're really rocking. Yeah,
there's no question. The proximity of the students in those places, and people are passionate about it. We dodged the bullet. I mean, students weren't back yet at Arizona.
Right.
So you didn't quite get that. But there's always going to be, every seat in that place is going to be full, and there's a lot of knowledgeable fans. As you know, you sit right there with us at McHale and you hear all kinds of stuff. So it has an impact. There's no doubt about it. And you come in here and play at elevation and get the crowd going. It's a fun environment to be a part of.
So you got Washington coming in on Thursday night. You swept them a year ago up there and down here. This team, though, they bring just about everybody back from last year's team. All the key players are back. David Crisp, who feels like he's been there for about 8 years.
Yep.
Jalen Noel, Noah Dickerson, Matisse Thybulle, Nas Carter. Those guys are all back. This is a good team. And they lost 4 games, Larry, in the non-conference, but were 3 to top 15 teams.
Yeah.
And the other loss was to Minnesota in a 2-point game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. As you look, they lost to Auburn, which everybody else has this year. Virginia Tech at a tournament neutral site type of thing. Buzzer with Gonzaga, and then the game you just mentioned with Minnesota. So they're a veteran team. They know what they want to do. Lead our league in block shots. Lead our league in turning you over in that zone. It's no secret what they're going to do when they come in, and everybody really has an understanding for their role and team you've got to be ready for, and you have to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves.
They probably, you always talk about heads of snakes. They probably have 2, because one's on the defensive end and one's on the offensive end. But everything they do kind of is predicated with that matchup zone, that matchup that they played at Syracuse when Hopkins was there. And they seem to have the perfect guy to fit at the top of that zone in Matisse Thybulle, right?
Yeah, it's always about length and anticipation, gets his hands on an awful lot of balls. And again, you can't simulate some of that unless you want to give everybody, extenders on their arms and get out in passing lanes. And the big fella, Dickerson, in the post for them is a load. He's as good and really a veteran post guy that I thought was a senior.
I did too.
I was like, oh, you're back. And that's always what I've said with our program. It's fun when you get young kids playing and they're around forever, and you want other coaches to say, man, is he still here? Brandon Taylor, Jordan Loveridge, those guys, they're not gone yet. And that's where we are with this squad, I think. We've got enough young guys that hopefully we can establish that same kind of identity, and they pose some different problems. There's no doubt about it.
Jalen Dixon's probably that guy on the other end, right? Or I say Jalen Dixon, Noel.
Yeah.
On the other end, he's probably their best offensive player.
Yeah, and I think he'll be playing at the next level. He's a young kid.
He's only
a sophomore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's really good, ball in hand, guard, physical kid that gets into the paint, rises up above you. He's a tremendous player, and we got to have a plan.
What's the key to that matchup zone in attacking that matchup zone?
Well, you can't turn it over.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing about their zone that a lot of people think, you know, you're going with the zone. One of the best elements about it is it makes them better in transition too. Their big man never leaves the basket, so they get an awful lot of rebounds. And their guards are always in the right spot to start an offensive transition break. And that's the one thing, you can't turn it over because they're really quick getting down the floor. And having some patience. That's been the thing for us is, you know, ball fakes, they're always great in passing lanes. We call it fake one, make one, or FOMO, F-O-M-O. You know, you got to be really smart with the ball and make passes. And then when you do get the ball around the rim, we've got to be willing, number one, to be really strong with it, or collapse the defense and even get the ball back outside because they're such a good shot blocking team.
Take a time out on the Coaches Show. We'll come back. I'll get a quick thought from him on the league. And then in our final segment, we'll get our 3 questions on the 2-man 3-question weave and his pick on tonight's national championship game. All coming up on the Coaches Show right here from Learfield. Donnie really knocking down the threes. We welcome you back in for the last segment of the show today. 3-question, 2-man weave. We lead it off with this.
Oh, boy.
When you're seeking basketball advice, who do you turn to outside your staff? Who's your first call to?
Well, I've talked to Coach Sloan quite a bit, get his feedback because it's never sugar-coated. I'll reach out to Coach Montgomery, who I played for, and I was really close to calling Stu Morrill last week to just try to get, have some conversation with somebody in the know that's a little bit removed.
All guys you played for.
Yeah, and you know what? We've got such a great staff here. I mean, it'd be different if you didn't feel like you had a bunch of great opinions within your own program. That most of the time, and guys don't sugarcoat it, and we'll come in when it's time to sit down, and I really trust everybody and love all the different opinions with the basketball minds that we have. So it's not like you're on an island that you a lot of time I'll get together with Dr. Hill, Chris Hill, but we usually don't talk basketball.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just having somebody in your corner that you can kind of get away from it.
All right, your first car was what?
My first car was a '54 Dodge pickup with the nice curved back window. I'll tell you a quick story. I sold it.
No, you don't have a quick story.
Okay.
All right, we'll save that story for another time.
Sorry.
Who's your pick tonight in the national championship
game?
Really good,
too. I'm going to pick Clemson because I'm kind of tired of the Alabama machine.
Yeah.
But Clemson is kind of that same machine right now.
And you were giving me a game key earlier. What's the game key?
Putting pressure on the quarterback.
Okay.
Yep.
Got to get pressure on Tua and/or Trevor Lawrence. For Larry, I'm Bill and our entire staff here. We'll talk to you Thursday night. Just across the way as the Utes play the Washington Huskies. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Deseret First Credit Union. Good night.
Don't have time.